Hello and welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. Today we're talking two recent polls that came out with Hrant Mikaelian. Hello Hrant, thanks for joining us today.
Hello guys, thank you for having me.
So the International Republican Institute poll, which was released last week, was actually conducted just before Christmas 2023. And maybe the responses incorporate the good feelings and optimism of the holiday season as well. Who knows? It polled over 1,500 residents of Armenia and had a response rate of 28% with an estimated margin error of plus or minus 2.5%. Now, if you'd like to see the poll slides that we're going to discuss, you can follow our show on our YouTube channel, where we will put the slides in our video. We'll also put them in our show notes at podcasts.groong.org. That's Groong, podcasts.groong.org.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, so the two polls that we're going to cover is this IRI poll, and the other one is the MPG poll, which traditionally is released more often, and is traditionally what we cover.
So let's start with slide 5, which asks, is Armenia heading in the right direction or the wrong direction? And generally, it seems like people are fairly polarized over this question, slightly favoring right direction over wrong direction, but, right around 45%. What are your thoughts about how respondents have assessed this, Hrant?
Well, first of all, what we see in this poll is that the number of those who assess the situation positively has increased. So it was like 38%, and now it's almost 50%. The question is, to which extent this figure describes the current reality? The issue number one is the timing. The fieldwork of this poll was conducted in December 2023, so it's already 3 months ago. And at that time, I would say there was some growth in positive assessments of the trend due to the shock in public opinion. That's interesting, but it was also measured by MPG, that initial shock after ethnic cleansing and occupation of Artsakh brought to increase of approval rate of government, while afterwards it led to decreased estimates, and the decrease was much bigger. So first of all, I think after the poll was conducted, the situation has changed. The second issue is to which extent it was correct, because there are debates currently in Armenian blogs and expert community to which extent this was correct. And what I can say is that with every poll we have some extent of error margin, and 2.5% is also not describing everything. There is some credibility that it can be even bigger. So I think this case could be one of such cases where, due to some reasons, technical reasons, I think the support rate of government has been overestimated, because other polls do not show this trend so pronounced. And again, moreover, now we have again decrease. For example, the prime minister support rate now is like 29% or so. So 29% trust prime minister. The overall assessment of the positive trend of the country is usually a bit higher than trust towards the prime minister office. But anyway, I think today such assessment would be at much lower position than 50%.
Hrant, when you said that the prime minister's approval rate is 29%, is that from the same poll, or is that were you quoting a different poll?
No, that's a different poll.
That's from the MPG one?
Yeah, but on the other hand, we see that there is no substantial shift in government support even in IRI poll. So again, I'm connecting this change in public opinion to the shock, and I think it's rather short-term fluctuation than some new trend or something.
We will see in a later slide that actually both Pashinyan and the ruling party got only about 17% approval rating in this poll.
Well, this 17% is not the same 17% as we would say approval rating, because this one is electoral rating. So it's number of people who are ready to vote for the ruling party, and this rating is usually the lowest among all approval ratings. If you look at First one could be approval, another could be trust, and another is electoral rating. So this is usually the lowest. And also due to methodology, some answers have been divided. For example, some people have answered that they are going to support My Step Alliance, which was the name of the current ruling party alliance like 6 years ago. But now we can say that those people who mentioned My Step Alliance, they are again supporting Pashinyan. And then there were some people who mentioned Nikol Pashinyan personally. So if we include those as well, then we will get 23% of electoral rating. So that is a bit higher. But again, we don't see really high support rate towards the government. And again, from other polls, we can assume that after December, the approval rating of the government has decreased again.
All right, well, let's move to the next slide that we want to take a look at, which is slide number 8. And it asks, again, in this IRI poll, and it asks, what are the main problems Armenia is currently facing? The top concern looks to be security and borders, with a third of the respondents worried about this issue. The economy is at 23% and is second on the poll. And interestingly, in an economy that the government claims to be is going gangbusters, people are apparently not really feeling it, given that if we add all the 4 economy subtopics, in the top 30, we'll have a pretty high ranking concern. I don't know if it's 51%, but I think we initially calculated it to be 51%. But it was divided between low wages, general economy unemployment, and other economy topics. So I don't know why the IRI poll presented these numbers in such a spread out way.
We have the economy, unemployment, and then you can see a little further down, we have economy, cost of living, and there are a couple of others in the top 20. And I added them up to be at 51%. Now, I don't know if that's the correct thing to do, but people do seem to have a concern that is bunched under the super category of economy and then various sections of it.
And quality of schools and education is like 8th on the list. But more alarmingly, the needs of displaced Artsakh Armenians are shown to be 18th on the ranking, with 3% of the people responding that that's a problem. And the return of Artsakh Armenians, similarly to their ancestral lands, 2% of the people voted for that or selected that option, and that was number 28. So my question is, I think I am truly surprised, and I think everyone here today is truly surprised, because everyone we interact with would probably list Artsakh-related topics and the fate of the Artsakh, our brothers and sisters from Artsakh, as a top concern. So can you tell us what factors led to this huge discrepancy in this poll between what our expectations would be and what the results are?
Well, I think these results are problematic. Of course, you could expect that economic issues are among top concern issues, and that you can find everywhere. But I would not expect, first of all, the growth of importance of economic issues over time, because, well, generally, due to some reasons, but the last 3 years were generally economically successful. So I would not expect an increase of economic concerns. At the same time, the low number of people who are quoting Artsakh-related issues or national security issues and so on, I think this is problematic. So in previous polls, both by IRI and the MPG, we would see the top 5 issues have always been the national security issues. And personally, I don't know anyone who is not concerned about national security. And in addition to that, we would have in all of the polls, combined, virtually everyone was very concerned about national security issues. And there are good reasons for that right now. But on the other hand, we see too little reaction on Artsakh issue, because 3% is basically the same number as number of Artsakhis in Armenia right now. So my assumption again is that there are some maybe fluctuations with the field, because given that society was undergoing the shock, the response rate could drop significantly. For example, some people who were more concerned or who were, more critical towards the situation or something else, they could avoid responding to such polls. That could affect the field, I think. I don't know exactly. It could be the real situation measured at that time, Although it is again problematic because in other question we see that approval rank of Armenian armed forces has increased, and basically there are no reasons for that.
Yes.
I mean, the situation is worsening, and with armed forces again as well, and there is no reason why the approval rate of armed forces could increase. Of course, people would like to trust armed forces, but they have no ground for that.
Yeah.
So I think there is problem with the field.
That's an upcoming question because there's a slide that they have specifically on that topic. But what was a little strange for me is that in slide 39, for example, Hrant, where they ask how important is it for the Armenian government to help Armenians who have been forcibly displaced from Artsakh, across the demographics, over 70% have said it's very important. Not just important, but with the important, it turns out to be almost like 90+%. But I wanted to ask your thoughts about this. For something that is so important for Armenians, to go and poll at 2% or 3% just seems a little odd. Do you see any incongruencies in the poll results on the topic of Artsakh?
Well, I can understand it in the following way. While the people are asked about the top concern of the country, they are comparing this issue to what they have heard from media. So basically, they are reproducing the media narratives and, to be frank, government propaganda, which avoids putting security-related or Artsakh-related concerns to the top. Mostly, these issues are not covered by the governmental media at all. And basically, we have the picture where only opposition media, which are rather marginalized, to speak on those issues. So that's why these are not named in priorities. But if you ask people specifically about security issues or about the Artsakh, you would get a very consolidated answer. Like here, for example, as you said, 90+% have said that it's important to help Artsakh Armenians. But again, people avoid naming that because they expect this to be, assessed negatively. They avoid, this conflicting topic, let's say.
The other related question about Artsakh is also in this area of discrepancies and incongruences. For instance, it asks, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the Armenian government's handling of the crisis related to the forcibly displaced Armenians from Artsakh? And 73% said they are either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied, and only 22% said they aren't satisfied. When you compare this with the disaggregation topics, such as, do you know anyone from Artsakh? That number changes a little bit. So for those who said yes, they know someone from Artsakh, only about 63% said yes, Armenia is doing a good job, and Armenia, they're satisfied. And the number of people dissatisfied increases. But when you disaggregate based on the question of Armenia is heading in the right direction versus wrong direction, basically for the wrong direction people, majority are dissatisfied, and for the right direction people, that satisfaction number increases to 90% almost. So there seems to be very high polarization based on your political leanings, which is interesting, which is what I gathered from this. I don't know if this is correct. Maybe you can correct me, Hrant. So is that a right statement to say? And if so, then it seems like the people who are saying that yes, the Armenian government is going in the right direction are so numerous that they're basically tilting this whole poll towards their direction.
Well, again, I trust the company which has conducted the field work for IRI, the bravest company, which has consistently shown the good track record. But this time the field is problematic. I think there could be some technical reasons and some political reasons why people would not answer genuinely what they think, because I don't think this in any way corresponds to the real situation on the ground. On another page, we can see that 50% trust Armenia's Prime Minister office, which we don't see in other polls and which we don't observe in the real life. So I think this is a problematic result. And that's one side of the story. But another side of the story is how the government communicates with the people on its handling of the crisis. For example, we can remember how in 2020, the general opinion of the public regarding the government handling of COVID crisis was positive. So some 80% considered that government has handled the crisis well, while we knew that it was total failure, total mess, and not only we, Azerbaijan also knew that, and they used that as one of the justifications for the 2020 war, because they have seen how Armenian state became incapable of a strong institutional reaction. But public opinion assessment was positive on that. And not only in Armenia, by the way. We could see that in many other countries as well, the support towards government has increased, because again, when society is shocked and when people are afraid, they are somehow more prone to support government, or to, let's say, express support towards government, at least expecting that government is somehow handling the issue. And if they support the government will be more efficient to handle the important issues which the country is facing. So I think here is combination of issues. One is a field, which I think could not be effectively measured at the time. And another is generally the shift in public opinion, which is usually during the time of crisis, leads to increase of public support, while afterwards we see the more objective assessment, which is completely different from what we see during crisis times.
So, Hrant, when you say that there's a problem with the field, can you be a little bit more specific on what you mean by that?
Again, I think that many people who are critical towards government would avoid answering the questions, which would distort the measured picture. And given the figures here, I'm more than sure that picture is distorted due to this technical reason.
Understood.
Hovik, let's just take a moment here. We'd like to remind our listeners to go to our donate page, podcasts.groong.org/donate, or just go to podcasts.groong.org, and there's a donate link there, and consider buying us a coffee, or better yet, become a sustaining member of Groong through our Patreon link and give us monthly.
You know, there aren't that many shows like us who digest Armenian news weekly and bring you interesting discussions relevant to it in English language and in a regular manner. We have always operated as a labor of love, and we're not only non-profit, but we're also non-budget, unfortunately. So we rely on listeners like you to help us. Just 2 to 3 friends who have committed our life's time and effort to understand the world around Armenians and Armenia, and sharing that understanding with you.
So we will continue to do our work as we always have, but your support will help us expand our reach to more people who are interested in Armenian affairs around the world.
So please visit our donate page. Again, podcasts.groong.org/donate, and consider supporting us. Thank you in advance. We appreciate your listening to us, and we take that trust and your support very seriously.
Thank you.
Understood. All right, let's move to a few other slides related to Armenia's perception of foreign partners, whether it's political partners, whether it's relations between countries. So, for instance, slide 45 talks about how would you evaluate the current state of the relationship between Armenia and, the country of choice. France, India, USA, Iran. USA are on the top 3. Then people still trust Iran, then EU, Georgia. And on the bottom, it's number 1 from the bottom is Azerbaijan, number 2 from the bottom is Turkey, number 3 is Israel, and number 4 is Russia. So I don't have any differential measurements between this and previous cases, but it's clear that public support for Russia has dropped significantly. But there is still like a solid base of people, although it's still worrisome that so many people now think that the relationship between, in reality, the relationship with Armenia and Russia is obviously very problematic right now. So maybe they are being just objective. But another question, so Hrant, before you answer this, another question talks about which of these countries do you consider the most important security partners for Armenia? People name France, Iran, and USA as the top 3, and Russia as number 4, above European Union. So how do you juxtapose all of these questions and all of these answers regarding to foreign policy and specifically security cooperation?
And can I also come in for just a second, Hrant? Let's add to that slide 9 of the MPG poll, which is fairly similar to this. Which countries can Armenia expect military political support from? I found it interesting to see that 46% say France, 23% say India, and then 22% say Russia. I was going to come to this one a little bit later, but since we're discussing these issues, what's interesting is that given how degraded the relations are and the level of anti-Russian propaganda on government media channels, it's a surprise that Russia remains the third most trusted military political ally. And the others are fluctuating widely, which makes me think that the government propaganda is having a significant effect in shaping the results that we are seeing in some of these polls.
Obviously, first of all, I think what is most interesting here is dynamics of Russia and Turkey. So on one hand, we see the growth of negative evaluations of Russian-Armenian relations and growth of positive evaluations of Armenian-Turkish relations. So currently, 31%, according to IRI Poll, consider Armenian-Russian relations positive, good or somewhat good, and 27% consider Armenian-Turkish relations good or somewhat good. So basically, we are approaching to comparable numbers on one hand. On another hand, we see that among the political partners, 34% mentioned among important political partners. In the same IRI poll, mentioned Russia as important partner.
That's slide 51.
While just 4% mentioned Turkey. So what we see from here, that at least 34% consider Russia important partner, but fewer people see that Russian-Armenian relations are good. So according to people, Russian-Armenian relations should be improved. At the same time, if we look at Armenian-Turkish relations, only 4% consider political relations with Turkey as important, but 27% see that those are good or are improving. So basically, there is no public demand for either improving of relations with Azerbaijan or Turkey. I mean, improving, well, basically everyone wants these relations to be improved, but at what cost? In this format, let's say. So but they are going in a very positive manner as of Armenian government, of course, because Turkey was one of co-actors of ethnic cleansings in Artsakh, and Turkey is definitely threatening Armenia, of attacking Armenia militarily every other day, and we have seen construction of new defensive lines along Armenian border in Armavir, between Armavir and Ihdir from Turkish side. So basically, Turkey is preparing for a new war. So in reality, people understand that, but the government is pursuing the policy of switching from Russia to Turkey, basically, not even to the West or France and so on. So that's just media. So of course, government propaganda is very important in shaping public opinion, what we see from here. But indirectly, we can see that. In addition to that, when we look at disaggregation by age, we see that if among the general population there is, let's say, 4% of those who consider relations with Turkey as important political relations. Among youth, it's only 1%. And there are significantly more such people among elderly, which you would not expect based on a pre-assumption that elderly are more conservative, while youth are more liberal and so on. But the thing is not being liberal or conservative, but the fact that that elderly are consuming the TV shows and government propaganda to much bigger scale.
Exactly.
So this is the reason. So basically, the whole picture is shaped by the government propaganda. Now, another thing is, on one hand, you would assume that, okay, there are objective reasons why Russian-Armenian relations would be assessed as bad. First of all, on Russian side, we see more and more discontent and more harsh statements. On the other hand, but again, on Turkish side, we also see such statements, but positive assessment of relations with Turkey is increasing, while with Russia is decreasing, and very quickly. On the other hand, the thing is that assessment of France and European Union and United States is positive, and ethnic cleansing in Artsakh did not affect those, but it affected Russians. Well, on one hand, we can say Russians were stationed in Artsakh and they did not prevent ethnic cleansing, which is, of course, a shame. And this would require long-term discussions and addressments in future. But at the same time, okay, what did the European Union do? On the same day when the ethnic cleansing was being conducted by the Azerbaijan, European Union has reassured officially that they support energy dialogue and they considered Azerbaijan their strategic partner. So European Union also did not, behave nicely in all this regard. And adding to that, Pashinyan has first time recognized Azerbaijan's territorial integrity in Prague in October 2022 at the demand of Charles Michel. So I think it's not the reality at all. Yes, Russia is partially guilty in ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, and I think no one can deny that. And I think European Union's role here is at least not less than Russians. And if there is difference in these assessments, then we have a problem. So, and this problem is public opinion, which is based on media. And again, one thing is public opinion, another thing is measured public opinion, another thing is reported public opinion, and then another issue is to which extent the public opinion as, something really measurable exists at all. So I think these results are reassuring us that all these, public opinion shifts are, first of all, very unstable and highly subjective based on media consumption. So going back to what you said previously regarding the 9th slide in MPG poll, when there was discussion of who Armenia can rely on, military equipment gathering and so on, and Russia was one of the top countries, obviously because, one thing when you ask about the emotional assessment, which is how do you assess the relations with any of those countries? Another thing is when you put this thing on the ground and you ask about hard facts and the things which are taking place in reality and in this current region. Here you cannot ignore Russia. You might want, but you cannot ignore Russia. You cannot ignore Iran. You cannot ignore Turkey, because these three empires have been shaping South Caucasus for the last 300 years, and basically nothing has changed. Of course, yes, we see Western powers, we see more and more China, we see India, and so on. But still, these three empires, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, will be shaping the region in any way. So, Russian assessment here will be, of course, higher than when you assess just emotions.
So it's still higher. My problem is that, yes, even when you bring it more to the ground, as you say, and ask, okay, who is the most important security partner for Armenia? They're not going to say New Zealand, but it's still, a little bit clouded by this propaganda. For instance, I'm looking at going back to the slide 55 for MPG. France is rated, and USA are rated above Russia, and India is nowhere to be found. So it's all, it doesn't make sense, but still, Russia is number 4. And I just want to mention that there was this article today published by Rand, or maybe it was yesterday. The headline is, "The US can't guarantee Armenia's security despite Azerbaijan's threats." And the closing, basically says that the West has to recognize and accept Armenia's multi-alignment and focus on areas where it can where it is comparably able and willing to deepen ties and foster stability. So I think that's a more nuanced and more reasonable suggestion of how to cooperate with the West. But when you say, when you have unrealistic expectations about support from France, 50% of the people think that France is Armenia's most important security partner. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry, guys, we love France, but we just got like 50 APCs from them and a couple of radars. We received more important weaponry from India, which is not even on this list. So there's obviously something weird going on with all these polls, but I think that's a fact in and of itself that we should highlight, that all these polls are a bit gibberish. And when you see someone taking one of these slides and quoting them without the context or without mentioning that on like a few slides over, you get a completely different picture, then you should be aware of that. So depending on what how the question is asked, what context it's asked in, you will get a different response.
I also thought that it was very strange that in the IRI poll, there was nothing about India. It never came up in the answers or anything, yet it is fairly prominent in the MPG poll and also in government propaganda. So if we go to slide 59, I believe, I'd like you to talk a little bit about that because it shows what the people are listening to. So, for example, they listen to First Channel, they listen to Armenia TV, there's Shant TV, there's Azadutun. But if you look at the pro-government channels, more than 2/3 of the people are basically getting their information from the government. What do you make of this?
Yes. Well, I think that is in line with previous knowledge and assessments, and including ones that I have compiled for YouTube content viewership. The only, I believe, opposition-related channels on this list are Channel 5 and News AM. Channel 5 is like 3% people report that as their first response, and altogether like 5%. So yes, when you have this kind of a discrepancy between viewership, you will have a problem. And the issue is also that this is sometimes not objective. I don't think this is the result of people not agreeing with the opposition and therefore deciding not to go to Channel 5. I think this is the result of government shaping the media field as well. For instance, Channel 5 used to be on the public multiplex, so most people would be able to view it for free in Yerevan, and they were removed from the public multiplex, meaning that they have much less viewership. So these changes in the shifts of the viewership have gone actually even more pro-government as a result of governments meddling and manipulating in the media. And no matter what foreign ambassadors say about democracy and blah 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 about Armenia, I think it's really important to understand that the government's manipulation and government's hands are in all these areas. Whether it's media freedom, whether it's like trying to in one case they try to close down TV channels, in other cases they try to just amplify their own.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting in slide 61 that people basically said that their own relatives were probably the most trustworthy source of information for news.
That's a problem in and of itself, but yes, yeah. Because most people are also taxi drivers who are a culture in and of itself in terms of spreading fake news. But
yeah, whether you buy a newspaper or you take a taxi ride, that's where your information is, I guess.
All right, let's go and cover some slides in the MPG poll. Hrant, there was one question, slide number 5 on MPG. Should Armenia continue participating in the CSTO or try to join NATO? Essentially, the result is 22% say NATO, 28% say CSTO, and 44% say that Armenia should stay non-bloc. I mean, that is, to me, if I have to say it, it's a crazy, crazy result. And that's exactly probably what Turkey and Azerbaijan want Armenia to be. Do you think this is a result of bloc fatigue that Armenia has? Basically, they're not, because it's really complex to be in one bloc versus another. So, or is this also, as you say, the result of maybe manipulation or propaganda? And if suddenly we become non-bloc, will all the threats of Azerbaijan go away essentially in Turkey?
Well, I think this situation is really complicated. First, Turkey-Armenian border is NATO CSTO border. So it's basically expected to be conflicting border. So remaining part of CSTO without any hard guarantees on the CSTO side is a real problem for Armenia, on one hand. On another hand, becoming non-aligned means that Armenia is losing even these very weak guarantees. Becoming part of the NATO, it means becoming,
enemies with Russia and Iran.
Not only that, Turkish client state. Because, well, first of all, Armenia cannot become part of the NATO because, there are some requirements and they cannot be met. But even if they are, I mean, Armenia is becoming Turkey's client state, which is unacceptable at any terms. So Armenia has no good choice here, which is real big issue. And maybe this is one of the reasons why people are selecting, non-alignment as an option. And basically, Armenians want to avoid great power clash in this region. But here, this question, I think, is important in terms of putting this orientation stuff to test. So they are not asking whether do you like or dislike CSTO or NATO, and they don't ask it separately, but they put East as either NATO or CSTO or non-alignment. So people have to choose one, not several, like previously. So here we see still slightly preferable CSTO, less NATO, and majority non-alignment. So in this term, this could be understood. But again, objectively, Armenia is in very hard security situation right now. Armenia does not get virtually no security umbrella from Russia, given objective and subjective trends, where objective is Russian-Ukrainian war, and Russia directs all its military capacities there. And subjective is, bad conditions of Armenian-Russian relations, and Russia does not want to.
What you're saying, Hrant, really aligns well with slide 7, where 81% of the people responded with their belief that there will be imminent war, or it's in the near term.
Yeah, right. So if you look at pro-government media, you will never meet such, assessments. No one talks about that. Government communicates that the peace deal with Azerbaijan and with Turkey is really close, that there are several weeks to wait, and then it's there. Although I don't believe it, not only because of we have already good track record with Azerbaijan and with its plans, but also, can you imagine how Armenians are traveling to Nakhichevan freely, moving here and there, visiting Artsakh, and maybe starting residing there again? If you make a peace deal, that is implied. Can you imagine this trade deal and so on? That's totally out of the table. So in reality, we are really far from peace deal because Azerbaijan sees its next goals as a war against Armenia, and the whole government propaganda in Azerbaijan is military propaganda against Armenia. So there is no chance for peace. Maybe there can be even some paper signed, but no chance for peace for sure. So people feel that, and 80% or more than 80% assess it as a real risk. And again, this contrasts with government propaganda. And this contrasts also with the previous results, where only 37% considered security top issue, and some 47% as overall issue. While here, 81% considers that there is a high risk of new war.
Yeah, that's pretty alarming.
Yeah, sorry. And by the way, here is another thing, which, according to the government, the Artsakh issue was the main reason for the war with Azerbaijan, and Armenian demands, well, basically it's a reproduction of Turkish narrative, but Armenian demands in Artsakh were a reason for the war. But now we see that Azerbaijan violently took Artsakh, conducted ethnic cleansing, but still there is high risk of war. For what? Well, for the same reason why the previous war happened. And again, I think now people see that it's not Artsakh, and it never was about just Artsakh.
Yeah. I want to jump back one slide because it's relevant to this issue we're discussing. It says, is the Armenian government doing enough to free the Artsakh leadership who are in prison in Baku? And interestingly enough, 60% say no, the government is not doing enough, and only 26%, a quarter of the people, say enough is being done about it. What do you make of this response?
Well, I think this is true assessment, how people assess government's Artsakh policy. So 26%, which is lower than rate of support of the government, which is logical because Artsakh case is total failure. People are still in prison and so on. But on the other hand, we had in IRI poll, we had majority approving dealing with the refugees. Of course, that's different story. And I think there is real big difference between assessment of how the government deals with refugees and how it deals with the leaders of Artsakh, which are jailed in Baku. But again, I think this shows real political assessment of people, how do they view the policy right now, which is 26 versus 60%. And on one hand, it's 2-1 or maybe a bit more, but still, it's not that dramatic difference. It's not total majority against the government, but still significant majority against the government in this term.
Let's look at one more slide today, which is slide number 8 from the MPG poll. How are you disposed towards Armenia's active military cooperation with France? I guess the similar question was asked in the IRI poll, and 82% approve of Armenia's cooperation with France. So my question is, what's there not to approve? Is this bad in and of itself?
That's a good question, because if you look at Armenian media, you will see, okay, France is nice, France is good, French love Armenians, and Macron is writing his tweets in Armenian, so we need to approve it. You cannot find any contrasting opinion in Armenian media, so that's why I'll take this role on myself. Now, the issue is that no one knows the end game of France in the South Caucasus region. So France wants to create a stronghold in South Caucasus, or maybe
I think it's important when you say, about France's intentions in the Caucasus. Well, we know most recently that France has a very increased rhetoric against Russia. So I don't know if that nuance is being missed by people, but is France considered a NATO enemy of Russia? And if so, could its intentions currently be colored by that antagonism against Russia? But also in the Munich Security Conference in 2023, so about a year ago, France basically said that it views Armenia as a buffer to, quote, neo-colonial Russia. So yes, I think that France in general has a policy of using Armenia potentially in its fight against Russia. So how important is it for us to understand this and to have policies that take this into account?
Well, not only against Russia. So in French view, is Armenia an unsinkable aircraft carrier of the South Caucasus, or is France capable of keeping Armenia safe? Well, the answer is clearly no. So basically, yes, France has went into backyard of Russians, Turks, and Iranians, and plays this, really, really dangerous game. Now, in public opinion of Armenia, and let me be clear here, this cooperation is seen as something based on cultural thingy or civilizational shift.
Yeah, because of Charles Aznavour.
Not only him, but yes, and people would assess it like civilized, developed French versus barbaric Russians, Turks, and Iranians. So basically, this is racist.
I also heard that it's because of guilt. Like they're guilty because they sold away. They essentially ran away from the Ottoman Empire in Syria, and essentially Armenians were genocided again. So yes, yeah, I heard those narratives as well.
I don't think Macron feels guilty for his predecessors, which they did, in Kiliki 100 years ago. I don't think so. But in reality, in Armenian public opinion, what we see is basically racist worldview of, Armenia cooperating with civilized country against the barbaric neighbors and so on. And unfortunately, this is a reality. This is irrational worldview where Armenia should seek cooperation with civilized countries versus barbaric neighbors and so on. The reality on the ground is that, again, Armenia is surrounded by 3 former empires, which are in many ways still empires today: Russia, Turkey, and Iran. And all three consider French military presence in South Caucasus as something which they are not going to tolerate. Now, let's imagine Armenia is becoming a buffer state for France, as French say. How long Armenia in reality can sustain this way, can sustain, this role, and how long Armenia can sustain if both Russia, Turkey, and Iran start pushing Armenia, and they will. And I think French game here is really dangerous, and it might be, at some point, which is not in far future, Armenia might face military attacks, and then French will adopt many new resolutions. Europarlament will adopt many new resolutions, and they will condemn, they will cry, they will ask, and so on. But we need to think of our security ourselves. And I think this game of bringing France to region where Turks, Iranians, and Russians do not want to see it, and they are capable of acting clearly on the ground, and France is incapable of acting. And by the way, 1 month ago, Greek Prime Minister said that neither France nor US will help us if we are attacked by Turkey. And by the way, Greece has military exercises, real military exercises, naval exercises with France. And there is a way of supply through Mediterranean, which in Armenian case is absent. So France is present here in Armenia only in media terms if we exclude this, minor military deal. So basically, this is really, really dangerous game, which has no good end. So I think we need to consider this really seriously.
Yeah, we've had a lot of warning about this issue. For the purposes of time, I'm going to skip over slide 10, but I do have to mention it. That it was asking, was it right on the 36th anniversary of the Artsakh movement on February 20 for the Armenian government to do nothing to commemorate it? And 61% of the respondents said, no, it was not right. Something should have been done about that. All right, well, that's a long list of slides to address. Let's leave it there for today. Thank you, Hrant, for joining us on such short notice.
Thank you, Hrant.
Thank you, friends.
We'll talk soon.
See you next time.
All right, that's our show today. This episode was recorded on March 16, 2024. We've been talking with Hrant Mikaelian, who is a political scientist and multidisciplinary researcher in the social sciences based in Yerevan. He is also a senior researcher at the Caucasus Institute. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.